Welcome to Everything Casual, bringing you original football casual videos from the golden era of the 80s and 90s, right up to current day. Football away day stories and historic clashes between football firms. Subscribe so you don't miss out. We upload videos every week.
It's Leeds United, local, derby. The hatred is just, it's off the scale. And I'm going, my problem is I've got to look at myself and say, right, I know all the stories. Everyone knows the stories of Leeds. This is a violent place. Football violence is in full swing. United come in there. That's the enemy. That is the enemy. And I've got to say to myself, priority number one, safety. And I think when people look back and they look at the 70s and that, especially go to Leeds as a United fan, safety was your priority and it was all about numbers.
There are rivalries in football, and then there's Leeds United versus Manchester United. A hatred that runs far deeper than the 90 minutes on the pitch. Two cities divided by history, pride and violence. A modern-day War of the Roses, fought not just with boots and goals, but with fists, bricks and bottles. For decades, this rivalry has spilled out of the stadiums and into the streets, pitting two of England's most notorious hooligan firms against each other. Leeds United Service Crew and the Manchester United Red Army. In Leeds, the Service Crew began to take shape around 1974. They got their name from the British rail service they'd use to travel up and down the country, leaving a trail of destruction in their wake. They were young, proud, and fiercely loyal to their city. Smart-dressed lads in terrace fashion, armed with whatever they could find. Leeds away days quickly became headline news. Meanwhile, over in Manchester, the Red Army were already a force to be reckoned with. By the early 1970s, United had one of the largest away followings in Britain. The name Red Army came from the sight of thousands of Manx descending on rival towns, a sea of red scarves and swagger. But among them were smaller, tighter units, lads who weren't there for football. They were there for the fight. When the Service Crew and Red Army crossed paths, there was only ever going to be one outcome: violence. Then came the year 1977. An FA Cup semi-final between Leeds and Manchester United, staged at Hillsborough in Sheffield, a city caught between Yorkshire and Lancashire. It was supposed to be neutral ground, and newspapers the next day called it the Battle of the Roses. One officer reportedly said it was the worst football violence he'd ever seen. For many on both sides, that day cemented the hatred forever. It wasn't just football anymore, it was personal. In our videos, I like to get the point of view from both sides, from proper lads that have actually been a part of the firms and lived the battles. Firstly, let's hear the Manchester United's point of view. This is the legend that is Tony O'Neill, and what he thinks of the Manchester United versus Leeds rivalry. These are his own words. The 1990 season began, as always, with the Charity Shield at Wembley. Manchester United were playing league champions Liverpool, a fixture that in the past would have been X-rated for potential disorder. But since Heysel in 1985 and the appalling Hillsborough disaster in 1989, the prospect of Liverpool fans causing trouble had massively diminished. Nevertheless, the Operation Mars officers were out on the streets, in particular keeping tabs on the large number of United fans drinking around the Irish pubs of Kilburn. Tony O'Neill was seen in a very good mood, visiting a number of groups whilst at the pub. But, as expected, there was little trouble at the game. The first few home games of the league season were just as uneventful. The undercover officers seemed to spend their time traipsing around pubs before the game where nothing was happening, and then trying to tag along behind any of the lads they recognised at the game. It was clear they'd made very little headway in penetrating the inner reaches of the United mob. While they could now identify key faces, and could sometimes get near enough to them to overhear snatches of conversation, or even exchange the odd few words, they were nowhere near being taken into their confidence. A trip to Leeds United for the first away game, however, promised the breakthrough they needed. Leeds, whose fans detested their Manchester enemies with a passion, had just returned to the top division, and the game at Ellen Road would give them the opportunity to resume their extraordinary hatred of Manchester United. The game, on August 28th, was an evening kick-off, and United assembled a formidable mob of their biggest hitters at a service station on the M62 motorway before heading into Leeds to do battle. Yet somehow, the undercover officers would miss two of the biggest fights for years. This is an actual polig log. GMP observation log. Leeds vs Manchester United, 28th of August 1990. Leave Victoria Station. Travel to Hartshead Moor services, M62 eastbound. On the car park were approximately 150 to 200 Manchester United supporters. I observed targets Bravo, Lima, Kilo, November, Oscar, Quebec. Within minutes of our arrival, the group began to board their cars, and approximately 20 to 25 cars set off in convoy off the services area. Travel to Leeds, where on the A58 Halifax to Leeds Road, I observed a gang of 150 to 200 males walking towards LUFC. Right at the front were targets Kilo and Oscar. The gang were then led left into Gelderd Road before turning right under the motorway subway to LUFC. I was in a position to observe the gang walk past the visitors' turnstiles and then along the back of the south stand. At this point, target Kilo detached himself from the main gang, who had now stopped behind the south stand. Kilo crossed the road and began to walk in between the cars that had been parked all around the car park. He stopped temporarily and began leaning on a rail around before rejoining the main gang. The group then marched past the old Peacock public house, where a great number of Leeds supporters were congregated. They passed a knot of groups, where I could see members of the Manchester United gang beckoning the Leeds supporters with their hands. The group then walked through the gates that lead into the area behind the West Stand. This area was congested with Leeds supporters. After a few minutes, the gang returned out of this area. Again, targets Kilo and Oscar were leading, closely followed by November and Bravo. The gang went back towards the visitors' turnstiles. The Leeds fans were incensed by this action by the United gang. They were complaining that they, MU, shouldn't be allowed to get away with walking onto their end. LU also said that if they, LU, had done the same at Old Trafford, they would be happy. The Manchester gang then congregated across the road from the visitors' turnstiles. Enter South Stand, where I noticed target Kilo in the refreshment area. He was looking out of the windows, which overlook the main road. Leave the ground, minutes before full time. Outside, at the back of the car park, a gang of Leeds supporters had congregated, numbering approximately 60 to 80. They were moved on by the police. I overheard one Leeds fan talking to another. He said, "It's no use going into town. They didn't come by train." Eventually we made our way to Gelderd Road and past the Wheatsheaf public house, where a number of Leeds supporters had congregated outside. We returned to this area a short while later to find that this group had dispersed and that there were a number of police vehicles present. Drive along the A58 Halifax Road, where at a lay-by near to some houses there appeared to be evidence of disturbance between the residents and young males. No one identified. Tony: "Okay, if we're going to Leeds, then we'll have to change our tactics for this night game, as I'm sick of the sheepshaggers always claiming to want to kick our heads in, but they always seem to abuse small groups, and the odd fan, so it's down to us to take it to them. We have to have a meeting point arranged, and also a drop-off point, so offset one of the lads a few weeks before. He drives from Manchester and checks various routes for us to drive to the place where we have called it on with Leeds. Our destination is the Wheatsheaf pub, which is well away from the ground and easily accessible. Getting there undetected is the problem. Also, we are putting our lives at risk, as this encounter, if it goes wrong, could be the end of most of us. Leeds and Manchester viciously hate each other, so there are going to be no prisoners. To do this right, we have to outwit the police. Now, outwitting the Yorkshire Old Bill is not a problem. I don't think you have to outwit them, but you, the reader, can decide on that one. Our problem is the Manchester police. How do we avoid getting pulled in the Manchester police? We discussed the options, a couple of routes, and it is decided that everyone has to go in cars and meet up at Hartshead Moor service station on the M62, then come off at the next junction, the A58, and turn right and stay on the road till the end. And when is the end? Well, that's my job, as I'm in the lead car which leaves Hartshead Moor with my little pal and Mario driving. In Hartshead Moor service station are over 180 lads, all ready for this now. This is what it's all about. Knowing we were going for this meet with Leeds, not knowing how many of them would have it, and what kind of weapons were going to be used, my body which was building up to a nervous breakdown. My legs were weak, my stomach was turning over, and I was feeling sick. There was not much talking on that service station, as most who were there were feeling the same as me, except for one person, and that was Wing, who for 25 years has never shut up. Wing would and could talk to a cat if it stood still long enough. Football violence is his game, and talking about it is his passion. A fucking nightmare to your brain after a minute. We were 180 lads now, on a journey to the ultimate fight. Something we had been doing for years, not hiding behind the police or making excuses. The route we took was uneventful, apart from the occasional red light, which everyone simply drove straight through. There was no stopping, as being split up would have meant disaster. We pulled up about a mile from the wheat heath on the edge of some estate near some industrial units, and I got out first. Then it hit me. The excitement and all the day's tension got hold of me, and I suddenly collapsed on the grass verge, unable to get up under the stress. It doesn't matter how many fights you have been in. When you're in those situations, the tension can do very strange things, and on this occasion I lost the use of my legs for several seconds. It was actually half comical, and the little fellow and Mario and myself burst out laughing. It soon passed as the buzz changed. There they all were, pulling up and jumping out of cars, bouncing up and down, eager to get on their way. Half an hour before kick-off, dark, no police, just to go to firm on the march going to the pub for one almighty row. Leeds had been told on a few occasions that we were coming, and not to worry, we would get there no matter what, so just wait. Well, the tension must have got to them too, as when we came round the corner in the dark, about 500 yards away, you could see them streaming across the road, heading towards the ground. Why they didn't wait, I don't know. Maybe they thought it was a blag, and we were already at the ground. But we have always fronted it up. That's why all the others hate us. If there was no United, then there would have been no fun. We stopped on the pavement for a few seconds to get everyone tight so we could work out what was happening, then realised they hadn't spotted us, so off we went. We were now virtually running to get to them. It didn't take long for some of their stragglers to see us coming, but there was nothing they could do, so we were now round the corner and behind them. Leeds tried to run around and have a go, but in the dark and not organised, they had no chance of stopping us. We were into their backs and smacking them. Whoever tried to stand got it or was trampled. All they could do was carry on running as we chased them down under a bridge, where a few coppers tried to intervene. This kept on for another 200 yards, until we had to turn right near the ground, where the police, who were now swinging the truncheons about, stopped us. No one argued about it. Stop we did. No need to piss off the coppers. We had done what we had set out to do, plus no nickings, so why piss them off? Leeds carried on, which led them under the subway at the ground, the very way we were going to go. We knew it would be hostile once we were through there, but no one was going to touch us now. The police tried to cordon off the route, but as we came through, it was the same old story with Leeds. Half bricks and stones came flying at us, and a few were struck, but at Elland Road, you expect that. The place was going mad. Noise, pushing and shoving, and every now and then some daft Yorkshire mug who tried to mingle in was bowled over and trampled. Getting in the ground was no problem, as the police surrounded the small area by the entrance. Once in, the relief was evident as everyone was laughing and joking about it all. All people were asking who had done what. It was a carnival atmosphere. Those who'd missed it wanted to know what had happened. It was great. The plan had worked. That was the point of view from a Manchester United terrace legend. Now, let's hear from the point of view from Leeds Service Crew. All Leeds to Man United on the 9:20 a.m. train to Victoria. December 1979 was the first time a small group of teenage lads decided to bypass the specials and use a service train instead. A few lads who mixed with the National Front had mentioned it for a couple of weeks while they were leafleting and selling their newspapers. But Al P was behind the idea after suggesting it at a home match against Spurs a few weeks earlier. It was a fixture that had all the makings of a pivotal battle. On the day, only a few went on the service train, but it marked the start of something, and the origins of the Service Crew name. A second wave of lads was emerging to represent Leeds United on the terraces, and the casual scene was ushering in the next phase of football violence. Sean picks up the tale. We got to the ground and we were all bunched together. Man United were on both sides of the road with us. It was an eerie moment, but we were confident. We had a good mixed bunch of older lads and all us lot, who were 15 or 16 years old then. The policing was minimal, as it was at nearly every ground in the country in those days. But Leeds didn't seem to bother about that. Maybe fear took over. As we walked down Warwick Road, United tried getting in with us, but we had lads like Winnie, Ricky, Leaky, Lumbie, China, also known as Honey Monster, and Jonna from Bradford, who was dressed like Adamant in these fucking big 14 eyelet boots and punk gear, and must have looked out of place with all us fashion freaks. The older Donny lot like Big Tez, Ogre, Joe, and a few more were there. Then you had some of the town lot, the lads who drank in the Vine, Whip and Black Lion. So you could say we weren't bothered. We were well up for it. The Wortley Farnley lot, Seacroft, and a few younger ones from other areas like Bramley, Beeston, East End Park, Hare Hills, Rothwell, Kirkstall, Burley, were all mixed together. We felt unstoppable in our Adidas cagoules, baseball jackets, Samba or Kiosk boots, Stanley Parkers and green. There was a big roar as we walked down the road, and Brummy, who was from the city his nickname suggests, got a smack in the side of his head. That was it. Our old lot were straight into them. Stevie M had hold of this kid on a wall, punching fuck out of him, and Leaky and Winnie were fighting at the front of the escort. United were mainly all scarfers and shirters, but they did have a lot of lads on that road. Then the whole of the forecourt seemed to run up towards us. By then, about 2 minutes had passed, but it seemed like 20. Us lot weren't bothered. We had backed them off. Wouldn't say done them. But we got a big psychological boost as we were all kids, and I could see some of these were hardened, experienced hooligans. Got to say there was hundreds at the ground, and they got on the forecourt. There were little pockets of scuffling as we walked down, and they were trying to get in a midget escort. There were about 150 of us tops, and about 10 coppers with 2 on horses. When they came at us, it was like a tidal wave. Everyone was getting stuck in, every man for himself. There were boots flying, punches landing, then they started throwing things. A bottle came into us and a brick or two. In fact, they were hitting their own fans. We did really well there, massively outnumbered, but they actually had too many bodies, I think, to do us any great damage. Me and this mank in a black Adidas cagoule got fighting. He had a black muzzy and a big fringe, and we were giving each other what for and hung on to each other like 2 pit bulls. Fair play to him. The coppers moved in to break it up, and seemed more bothered about the mank fans than us. A few of them got smacked about and truncheoned, though one of the twins from the Vine got a right punch from a copper. Then they gave us a few digs for roughing up, kicking us and punching us, but we weren't bothered. We just held Man United on their manner. Some of our older lot were stepping out of this makeshift cordon and wanting a pop with their lot before being thrown back in with us. Then the forecourt seemed to empty, and United went up the road over the bridge. Our coach lot had arrived, and we could tell it was going off with them. The police were undermanned, and some of them holding us back had to leave to Williams, Foxy's, Baz, Zorro, some of the Wakey and Ponty lads, a few of the Cockney Whites, Selby York lads and myself, of course, a licence to have another go with them. It kicked off again with the United that were left on the forecourt, but didn't last long. The law came into us again and held us by where the United megastore is now. They had nicked a couple of us by this time, as they were pissed off with us. One of the older lot, Spike, a mad Rangers fan, and Teddy Boy who used to drink in the Whip and the Vine, got chinned by the law, and I think Monkey from Ponte got nicked. A lad from Barnsley called Crowy went up to them and said Munich 58 to provoke them, but they were just having verbals. The law then decided to put us lot into the ground as we were getting a bit cocky. After the game, there was little to write home about. Just a few scuffles going up Warwick Road. We were with the special train escort, and they'd held us in for about an hour. When we got near the eye hospital, us lot tried to break away down a side street, but the law sent the horses after us and rounded us up. It was weird, as some of us who'd gone on the service train wanted to get away, but the special lot didn't. As we got over the Mancunian Way, we tried to get away near Deansgate, as we could see a load of United down a street near the shops. There was a little scuffle, but they ran off, and the law shepherded us back in again. We got to Victoria, and United were waiting for us. We could see them, but the law held us up and moved a few on before taking us up to the station. As we got in, some came in the side entrance, and it kicked off. Some of them were Man City as well. They were playing away somewhere down south, I think. So obviously Leeds in their own centre was too good to miss. Alp cracked this big lad and his mate got into him. We ran out to the taxi ranks and got into them, with Alp chasing them round a bus stop. Pele and the Seacroft lads were having it too, before we all chased them down the hill to the backside of the station. Needless to say, the law weren't happy, fucking us off back into the station. Me, Ricky, Alan, Shaq, Winnie, Stevie M, Pelly, Baz, Zoz, Terry P, and a few more lads were getting out again, as a mixed was always a bunch of lads who hung round Victoria looking for Leeds and Scousers, who went shopping. They got a few smacks and ran off. Then we went into the rail bar and had a few drinks, with the older lot buying pints for us younger lot. A few of us were robbing crisps and chocolate for the train home. We were a blinding little unit when I look back at things, all cheeky as, game as fuck, but deep down all tight when we were together, and I think the older lot liked this about us. We got the train back to Leeds, and all the talk was about the forecourt, the day in general, who we played next at home and how we couldn't wait for our next away match. When that came around, we had a load more on the service train. Things were starting to look up for Leeds going on the train, and within 2 years, no one went on the specials. We had amassed a load from the coaches too. Some of the older lads from the early and mid-70s were starting to come back, as they had finished their jail sentences and had kids by then. Word had got round too that the only way to follow Leeds was by the service train, as you had the freedom of getting in other towns and a drink. We certainly had a mixed bunch. The older lot were starting to become trendy, and we had the political element of the NF coming as well, with all US fashion boys, who'd been going a couple of years by then. Leeds were starting to be taken seriously home, and even more so away due to a certain somebody just saying, "Let's go to Man United on the 9th 20 service train," in 1979. History in the making. With Leeds and Manchester United both dominant forces in British football during the 1960s, it was perhaps inevitable a loathing for the scum would exist. No neighbouring teams matched Leeds' prowess on the pitch, and as the reputation of United's Red Army increased, relations soured and were inflamed by the high-profile defections of players Joe Jordan and Gordon McQueen, who jumped ship over the Pennines as the club was starting to fade. Their rivalry stretched back to the mid-60s, when both were at the top of their game. They met in FA Cup semi-finals in 1965, 1970 and 1977, with the latter fixture a particularly tumultuous occasion at Towards All Things Manchester. Some Leeds lads admit a slight admiration for their hooligans, in that the Red Army has always kept it together and brought it to Elland Road. No one denies that. Sir Alex Ferguson is quoted as saying, "Unless you have been to a City and United derby, that's rivalry. And as for Leeds United, dearie, dearie me." Even the police would say to Leeds, "We hate you, why do you come here?" But they would stop off in Manchester at any opportunity. In 1971, both sets of fans arrived at Elland Road a while before the match, as was common in those days, with Man U in the scratching shed. 20 minutes before kick-off, they raced across the pitch to attack Leeds, who were mainly in the bars and refreshment area below the Kop stand. Someone shouted, "They're coming across the pitch," which prompted a mad rush back out onto the terraces. By the time Leeds were on the terraces, some 200 to 300 Reds were at the bottom of the Kop. The Leeds lads used the back stairs at each side of the Kop to charge down towards their rivals. Boys and dads were caught up in the scuffle, and things got quite naughty when the vastly outnumbered scum were pinned in at the bottom. Younger lads, like Scotty from Hare Hills, stood at the side watching it unfold and were enthralled. It was all over in a couple of minutes as the police regained order and returned Man U to the shed. The following year, again at Leeds, Man U were chased back to the city centre, and their train was bricked as it left the station. After demolition in 1974, United were then promoted at the first time of asking and returned to Elland Road in October 1975, with nearly 10,000 supporters and the reputation of being the biggest and worst behaved hooligan army in the world. Their huge away numbers were well known, and they didn't disappoint on this occasion. With several hundred officers on duty, police manpower was stretched to its limit. Fighting broke out in the streets and went on until evening. The M621 motorway was in the process of being built, and an area of terraced houses had been flattened, leaving a large mound of rubble which provided an excellent vantage point and ambush spot. Leeds gathered on the hillside after the match, armed themselves with bricks and concrete, and lay in wait. As Manchester United came within reach, they came under attack. Police were faced with trying to control running battles, smaller fights involving one or two people, and much larger brawls with streets and the broad main streets of the city as warring gangs went on the rampage. Frantic pedestrians had to scurry for safety as bricks whizzed about their ears. They heard the sickening thud of boot against body as those involved were either thrown or beaten to the ground and kicked mercilessly. One service crew lad called Dunter met a scum fan years later who was there that day and said he was stabbed and badly beaten. A Bradford Red who drank in the same pub as some of the Bradford Whites said he was attacked 4 times coming back from Elland Road. The first time was when a group of Leeds turned on him. He lay still on the floor. Others came over and picked him up and asked if he was okay. When he said he was, they replied, "Oh, you are you? Well, have some more," and beat him up again. When they left, he got up and tried to make his way back to the city centre, but was attacked again and had his scarf and jacket nicked. Then someone else attacked him with a shovel. He never went to watch Man United at Leeds again. Man United took a beating that day, but when the semi-final of the FA Cup at Hillsborough came around, they were out for vengeance. The difference in the size of support was embarrassing for Leeds. Out of a crowd of 55,000, they had just half the Kop, while the rest of the ground was taken by Man U. It was like playing at Old Trafford. Some claim half of Leeds' tickets ended up in the hands of their rivals, possibly down to the Yorkshire Reds buying them up. 2 10-foot steel fences had been erected inside Hillsborough, and the police, anticipating trouble, put more than 1,000 officers on duty. The first thing Jonna the punk saw on arrival at the ground was a Leeds fan tipping a tray of hot tea over a Man U fan. The Red and his mate were about to get some drinks when the Leeds fan said, "Have these," and threw the tray over him, resulting in him screaming and shouting, "I'm blind." Others, like Alan and Dave Frank, didn't have tickets and tried to climb into the ground after a fight involving bottles and glasses outside a nearby pub. Dave managed to get in after getting a leg up off Alan and a few others, but then police appeared and chased them off. They ended up in a park where a group of 15 Hells Angels were playing footy. They took their ball from them and had a big ruck, resulting in the lads throwing the Hells Angels in a pond, soaking them in their leather jackets. Another group of Leeds. The Leeds end had a line of police down the middle separating the two sets of fans. After Man U scored their 2 goals, Leeds tried to break through and managed to back some of them off, and during the second half, a group repeatedly went into their half of the section and attacked them from behind. A Times journalist who witnessed the trouble wrote, "At one stage, a fight broke out at the top of the terrace. Against the skyline, it was possible to see a long weapon crashing down on somebody's head. Although I could not see who was hitting whom, the people around me seemed to know." The fight created an almost hysterical atmosphere among the people outside, and when the police arrived on the top terrace, the group on the ground burst away, charging down the Penistone Road. The explanation of academics and sociologists, and even some sports ministers, seemed difficult to accept as one watched the breaking of windows, the vandalising of parked cars, urinating in gardens, charging in hundreds down back streets of terraced houses, and terrorising local residents. Perhaps what I saw was unrepresentative, but what took place was on a large enough scale to be very disturbing. It is not just the cost in policing and lost trade that a neutral city like Sheffield has to pay, but the frightening tyranny of virtually uncontrollable youths. After the game, which Man U won 2-1 to reach their second consecutive final, the two firms met on the same street and battle commenced. The 100 to 150 Leeds had the impetus and went in first against 300 to 400 United. The fighting lasted a good hour all the way to the train station, with the police trying to gain control in the middle. They claim they did us, and we claim we got them. Everyone has a different tale to tell, but I felt we stood there, said Scotty. As Jonna and other Bradford lads walked down the street back to their coach, the road was littered with badly beaten Reds, some covered in blood. One was half in and half out of a shop window. He was covered in blood, and his scarf looked as though someone had tried to cut it from around his neck. The police forced everyone onto the coaches, and Jonna was one of the last to leave. As they drove away, they looked out of the back window, and they saw a load of Man U fans running down the road towards them. They laughed and waved. Thank you for taking the time to watch this video. If you subscribe, you will be notified when we release a new video. It could be your firm we make a video about next, so don't miss out and hit the subscribe button. You can find me on Facebook or email me if you have a good story to tell. See you next time.